This week, we welcome back Lesley Carhart. She's the Principal Threat Analyst, or a Principal Threat Analyst at Dragos, to talk about moving from IT security to OT security, forensics and ICS, and much more. In the second segment, we welcome Chris Sanders. He's the founder of Applied Network Defense and the director of the Rural Technology Fund, to talk about delivering high-quality IT training and donating scholarships and equipment to further education in schools. In the security news, the top 5 mistakes that we make that make a field day for hackers, I should say. WordPress 5.2 brings in new security features, but don't get your hopes up. A discontinued insulin pump with a security flaw in high demand, and how to communicate privately even in the age of digital policing. Even gonna cover someone that smoked a bong shaped like a rifle and got in trouble. All that and more on this edition of Paul's Security Weekly.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where exploits run wild, packets aren't the only things getting sniffed, and the cocktails flow steady. It's Paul's Security Weekly. NetSparker, the developers of desktop and cloud-based web application security scanners that enable you to automatically identify vulnerabilities in your web applications and web services. NetSparker scanners employ a unique and dead-accurate vulnerability scanning engine that automatically verifies vulnerabilities with their proof of concept. For more information, visit them on the web at netsparker.com or email at contact@netsparker.com. Is your IT team ready to face the next implementation or upgrade? Do you have a pool of talented team members who are trained and ready to support your organization's growth? The right IT skills development platform can get you past the IT skills gap. With training content that's so engaging, some even call it binge-worthy learning, your team will watch and learn more with IT Pro TV. Get a free team trial of IT Pro TV today. Visit securityweekly.com/IT Pro TV. Thinkst Canary makes high-fidelity honeypots that set up in minutes and requires no ongoing administration. Attackers moving silently on your network advertise their presence by tripping over them. There's a good reason Thinkst Canaries are deployed and loved by some of the best security teams in the world. They're inexpensive, they're simple, and they work. For more information, go to securityweekly.com/canary or direct message @Thinkst on Twitter.
And welcome to the show. But first, let me introduce you to a man who loves to flash to the music. Mr. Paul Isidori.
Welcome, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. It's episode 603, recording on May 9th, 2019, in G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island. Next to me is Mr. Larry Pesce.
Yeah.
We're drinking. How do you like your martini?
It's good.
You like it?
Yeah, it's good.
Good. That's good.
Because, we had this
Salty.
discussion before the show that I'm not usually a martini guy, and I suggested martinis because
Just like you, Larry, it's a little salty.
I'm a lot salty. You should know. Wait, what?
Delicious. Well, thanks for being here, Larry. We got the table going today, too.
Yes.
I'm always excited when they break out the table. I don't know why. It's not for any special occasion.
Break out the plastic.
Yes, the plastic of the table. They break out the table. Like, I don't. It's just at a random interval. I never know. But when the table is here, I'm excited.
It feels so much more majestic.
I do. I like the table.
We won't see the cloud of the ash.
Right.
Yeah, the ash.
Yes. Right. On the lines remotely, Mr. Joff Thayer is here with us. Joff, welcome. Well, remotely.
Remotely
with us. Virtually with us.
Virtually, remotely, something.
Remotely welcome?
Well, good day, gentlemen. It's good to be here again on this fine Thursday evening.
Joff, your head is very shiny.
I know. New camera. It made it shinier.
It's good. That's all I expect for a camera is more shiny. Mr. Jeff Mann is here with us. Jeff, welcome.
Feels like it's been a while.
Yes.
It's good to be back. I've
I
been
missed
everywhere.
you, Jeff. I know. Yes, I missed you. You bring a very important aspect to the show. I can't quite put my finger on it, but there was a void when you weren't here. I'm serious. I mean, legit, dude. There was like a void, and I can't put my finger on it, but it's good to have you back.
Well, I was following one of the episodes on the Slack channel, and I heard that you guys were talking about PCI without me. So I'm like, I don't even have to be here, and it comes up.
Guilty.
So now you
Guilty.
can put your finger on it. It's on your keyboard. P C
I.
I. Oh, and N S A.
There you go.
You put your finger on it.
Wow, that was a dad joke, Larry.
Oh, sorry,
that
Jeff.
was
I had to.
awful.
I had to.
It's okay. I set you up. Somebody had to take it.
Register for our upcoming webcast with Kaseya and SaltStack by going to securityweekly.com/webcasts. That's right, I said SaltStack and not Observe It because we did observe its webcast. Now we're going to do one for SaltStack. Is that correct? Did I read that? I read that right? Okay. I get SaltStack and Salt Security. Maybe that's why you should attend the webcast to see what they're all about. I'm pretty sure that's the configuration management one. Just silence while people yell at me. They're listening in their cars when we release this. So go to securityweekly.com/webcasts. Find out more. You can go to /on-demand if you missed any of our previous webcasts. Lesley Carhart's here with us tonight. She has been performing digital forensics and incident response on unconventional systems and advanced adversary attacks for over a decade. That's a really narrow, awesome niche in your bio. I like that. Today she works for Dragos doing ICS security. Lesley, and of course she's Hacks for Pancakes on Twitter. Or it's maybe we'll bring Hacks for Pancakes on for a separate interview. Is that a thing?
I think this is a Hacks for Pancakes interview. I don't know.
Okay.
It's one or the other. Depends on how many of these I drink while we're talking.
Hacks for Pancakes. Welcome to the show.
It totally makes me hungry.
Yes, the
Me
pancake
too.
part.
How about that?
So Lesley, thank you for coming on the show tonight. And I wanted to start off by asking you what it's been like, because you were in more of a non-ICS security role, we'll say, and now you're in the ICS industry. What's that like, making that transition?
Man, I've been all over the place in my career, and I've always been in kind of the differ space, like the
Yep.
security operations and digital forensics incident response space. But I've been everywhere from like aircraft systems to electronics to when I was working at Motorola, I was doing radio over IP technology security. So I've been, like I said in my bio, I've been all over the place in like weird niches of technology that are IP based or similar and need cybersecurity stuff done and are totally non-conventional computer systems. So this has been a riot. I really enjoyed going to Dragos. It's a ton of really smart people. I'm intimidated every day by how brilliant they are. And it's a really fun opportunity to get into everything, stick my fingers into everything. So
Lesley, a slightly kind of off-topic question. You talked about kind of like IP in different settings and networking. We're looking at a technology for the show called NDI. It's from a company, New Tech, that makes a TriCaster. And it's audio and video. It's a protocol for audio and video to travel over the network. And when I'm doing some of the like next designs for our equipment, I'm like, this would be awesome, right? I could have like stacks of VMs and their audio and video wouldn't necessarily rely on hardware. It would come over the network, and that opens up so many possibilities. Have you looked at that before, or like what security looks like? And because then the security person to me is like, there's got to be some vulnerabilities in this thing.
I mean, it's more like in a lot of those protocols, there's no security built in at all. It's just not how they were designed. There are older protocols oftentimes that are encapsulated. You're sending serial stuff over IP, and that's not the point of them, to be secure. And I mean, I don't think that you have huge security concerns with somebody, putting amusing videos up on your feed while you're broadcasting or something, although that would be amazing.
Right.
It's all that threat modeling thing. Are you concerned about there being a security issue with that protocol being insecure? So
Sure.
it's been more challenging in things like critical communications, like police radios, things like that people are starting to run over IP, 911 systems.
Yes.
Ouch.
We had
She
that.
just said Security Weekly isn't critical. Darn it.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you kind of do want to have the WTTW thing happen. That'd be pretty entertaining. I'd like to see a comeback from that guy. So,
Yeah, those stories are always interesting to cover. But so what's it been like in ICS? Like, what are some of the differences you notice between the industrial control system side versus more traditional enterprises?
yeah, so I tell people when they ask when I went over to ICS is it's when you get kind of sick of dealing with all the new crap in cybersecurity, the field, the technical field. You say, I'm going back to 1999, guys. I'm getting in my time machine. I'm going back, and I'm going to go back and deal with Windows 2000 again. That's fine by me. And yeah, it's all great until you realize the Terminator followed you back, and he brought all the modern exploits with him. So like, it's an adventure. You know, you're dealing with a lot of legacy systems. You're dealing with a smattering of all kinds of bizarre protocols, and I get to poke my head into all kinds of niches, from like oil and gas to manufacturing to power, and it's a lot of different problems in legacy technology and oddly designed technologies that don't necessarily have security in place.
Is it really truly like, in this one of my questions, right, the state of ICS security, is it really like the 90s called and wanted their exploit back?
You know, it's a mix. It depends on the vertical. Like some of them they're really with it. Like you go to some industries where they have a lot of money in their security budget and they really care about security, and they have really pretty mature security programs, and they're doing their best. You know, they can't necessarily have downtime every day to patch, but they're doing a good effort to do passive monitoring and stuff. And then you go into other verticals where there's no budget, like little tiny local utilities where they have like one IT person, and you're asking them to do this massive cybersecurity effort, and they've got like one person to do everything and keep things running. And that's a heck of a lot to ask for such a small, low budget operation.
How do these organizations actually allow for testing? As in, if you do any kind of testing on a live production system, you could risk, taking out a power grid, for example.
Well, if people talking about taking down the power grid, there's a lot of meh in there. There's a lot of redundancy built in these systems. There's a lot of physical safety systems and fail safes and stuff. That's why it's so hard for adversaries to actually bring them down without a lot of research. But yeah, I mean, when you're dealing with a 30-year-old protocol, and it's been converted to IP through encapsulation and stuff, it can't necessarily know how to respond to every state you can put to it during a pen test, during a scan. So there's definitely scenarios where you could freeze up a system just because it doesn't know how to respond to the communication you sent it. It has a set list of things it knows how to respond to, and beyond that, there's no error handling. So yeah, I mean, you have to do a lot of things passively. You can't do we can't have EDR out there. We can't do, a bunch of active scanning. You can't be, scanning for names on hosts or doing port scans like you would be comfortable with in an IT environment. But you can do a ton passively with just packets traversing the network and logs and stuff. So it's okay.
I would assume that sometimes you would get the same device with the same firmware version or software version, right? If it's a microcode, running on code running on the microprocessor, that you would get that and you can do your testing offline. Is that pretty common, or like do some of these devices just don't, like, it's really hard to get a hold of them? Sure.
Yeah, so some places that have a budget do that, and it's pretty cool when they have that that digital twin environment, and you can go do your testing in that environment, but it's never going to be like a real environment. Like if you want to look for exploits on one device, maybe you can do that. But to see the whole distributed production environment with human activity on it, it's never going to be like a lab environment. So there's limits to that, but it's a cool thing if you can afford it.
Mm-hmm. When you do forensics, sorry, Jeff, go ahead.
I forget whether I read or heard recently somebody talking about ICS, and they said something like, it's not just about now I'm blanking on the technology, SCADA systems. There's some.
Oh, I wonder who that was. I think that might have been me.
Might have been you. But I'm curious, for all the old technology that you're encountering, there's got to be modems out there still, I would think.
Oh, sure. Sure. And we talk a lot about segmentation and air gapping and ICS, and it's really hard to do because, vendors want backdoor connections into their systems to do patching and maintenance and stuff, especially depending on their support contracts. And there's also the issue of like redundancy and accessing remote systems like RTUs. So yeah, there's a lot of modems out there.
So do you get to play with all that old-fashioned war dialing technology, or do you just not bother?
Once things are out there, they're kind of out there. I mean, there's not a lot of value in sitting there and trying to play phone showdown. Like we already know a ton of those systems are exposed. So you go into an environment and you start asking them about the phone lines that go into the system, and you go look at the POTS lines and you start tracing them out to see if they're connected to modems. there's a lot of issues, potential liability issues with sitting there and like war dialing modems to see if you hit an industrial system. Like, I'm sure you will. You absolutely will eventually. But it's more of a matter of if they're already out there and you know they've got a modem, that modem's exposed, and there's probably no security protocols on it at all. So that becomes an issue of finding right away.
I picture you having like the same computer as in war games and taking the same like phone and putting it on the thing.
There's definitely an application to have your butt set there and start going through phone lines to see what's connected to what, and not just for modems, but also for things that have integrated modems, like emergency control systems, fire suppression, things like that. But yeah, ICS is such a broad field. We call it one thing and one niche of security, but it encapsulates 50 years of technology and tons of different verticals, industry verticals, and different setups, and it's nearly infinite. It's huge.
It's interesting to go back to the audio gear. I'm coming to the same realization, right? Because I see the ICS industry, right? You mentioned 50 years of technology, largely analog way back in the day, making that slow progression into digital. I see the AV industry doing the same thing. All of your audio, analog audio mixers are now slowly making that transition into all digital and sending now things over the network. My experience with AV gear is it does not take security into account at all. No. And I think ICS in certain sectors, even still today, certainly 20 years ago, was in the same boat.
But Cat 6 is cheap. Cat 6 is real cheap. Ethernet is cheap to run. Even fiber is not that expensive to lay, depending on the type of fiber you're talking about. And overdoing proprietary technologies for data transmission, man, that's so much more efficient. It's definitely a huge cost savings. It's a great way to be able to do different types of logging. We've got historians and ICS networks that are collecting massive amounts of data about how the system's functioning, which is so useful for businesses and systems administration. So there's great reasons to put things on IP-based networks, but it makes a lot of changes for operation.
Lesley, you have a forensics background. How's it been if you had to do forensics in this world? And I'm assuming firmware, probably pretty cool to do forensics on, right? Microcode, maybe not so much. And what types of logging that you have? What's your experiences so far?
This is like a drama thing. There's people out there who are incident response and forensics on ICS is no different than anywhere else. And, to some extent that's true because the higher level systems in an industrial network are often Windows or Linux based, but those low-level systems do matter, and you do need to be able to do some basic forensics on them. And it's not just doing firmware analysis, if you're looking for corrupted or supply chain attacks firmware. But it's also being able to figure out how to pull logging off of devices. So just to pull the internal logs that aren't sent anything off of some of these weird devices, like an air conditioner or something, that's a task in itself. If it's not running with XP embedded or something, you've got to, figure out what the interface is, figure out what the pinout is, then, start looking to see what types of responses you can get from it. And maybe there's some documentation out there on the internet, and then you're really lucky if you could find some laying out there that talks about the protocol and how to communicate with the device. Maybe not. Maybe you have to poke at it until you can try to figure out how to get access to the file system and pull some logging data off of it. It really depends.
If it even keeps that, I mean, do some devices just not keep any logging data? I feel like my HVAC system at home gives me data on the LCD display. I don't think it stores it at all. And I've actually, made contact with some of the manufacturers and people that work there, and I want to get back to that because I'm like, is there a way I can just create a log of it? Because when I was having issues, it's actually a good talking point for tonight. I was having issues with it where it just would randomly fail. And I'm like, I talk to my HVAC guy, I'm like, look, I need the logs for this device. He's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, all right, hold on, back up. Let me just tell you about what I do for a living. And this is troubleshooting a server that's going down, except it's the thing that runs hot water and heat for my home. So we need to figure this out. And so I don't know, do some devices just not log anything?
So if you like OSINT, if you like doing OSINT, ICS is a great space to be in because I spend a lot of my time on Scribd and Google and stuff, just looking to see if I can find some documentation for these devices for a place
That's what
to
I
start.
was doing. Yeah, I totally get that.
That's a lot of our work is buying devices off off of eBay and seeing what they do, and then like looking to see if we can OSINT some data off of them about them. And sometimes they log, sometimes they don't. Sometimes there's things you can pull from memory on the device to get some type of the historical data about what the system's been doing, and sometimes you can't. It
really is like war games. It's like war games. We're on the search for the person who designed and implemented the system, because that's like the only point of reference.
That's the adventure. It's sometimes you're able to get a hold of somebody and get a good relationship, do a little social engineering, and get in touch with somebody who built the system. And a lot of times the companies are like post Stuxnet super zealous about their systems, and even if you're a proven security researcher, they're not going to give you anything. So you're out there to see if somebody posted something about the system to a message board in 1996 or something.
Well, in my experience was a lot of times these smaller manufacturing companies get swallowed up by larger companies. They get swallowed up by larger companies, right? So when I start doing the OSINT, I'm like 3 or 4 layers deep. Like, they work for this company, but they don't really work for that company. They work for the parent company, and then the small little division does nothing with security, right?
Yeah, I'm a natural investigator. That's why I love doing forensic incident response. So it was a natural fit. I don't necessarily enjoy like the protocol reversing as much. Like, that's not really my cup of tea, but going out and try to find information about how the systems function on that level of things, how they log, how they operate, what operating systems they're running, and how they do things, that's super intriguing. So
I'm going to give you the manufacturer model number of my HVAC system at home. Leslie, as a side project.
I'm sensing the real reason why Leslie's on the air tonight. It's just because Paul wants to get his air conditioning.
He wants me to fix his air conditioner for him.
It is fixed now. They replaced a part. I forget which part they.
So they didn't actually fix it. They just replaced stuff.
They just replaced stuff. Yes, pretty much. And it did fix it. So and that was my fear, right? You start just replacing parts without.
Yeah.
Yep.
So what are some of the other? Let's talk about this one. Do you find it difficult to earn the trust of ICS and operational technology folks? I think I was, telling you a story when I would talk to people in various industries. It's, like I worked for an ICS security company. I did some firmware reverse engineering stuff, and they're like, "That's great. You haven't worked and done security testing or anything with this very, very specific device." As we were just talking, these can be very, very specific devices for a very specific purpose. And like, I'm like, no, and like, you don't really earn their trust that way. And that's one of the perceptions that I had.
Man, so I look like this. Like, I don't look like a ICS security operator or a ICS operator or engineer, traditionally. So yeah, it is a little hard to walk into a place. I look young, I'm a woman, and, I walk into my business suit a lot of times because that's what you do as a consultant. And it is sometimes hard to get their trust, but you find out it's InfoSec, so much of InfoSec and being an incident responder is social engineering.
Yeah.
Once you understand how to talk to people about the things they care about and listen to them, that's everything. Walk in with a bunch of donuts, sit down with them, and ask them to tell you about what's interesting in their job. Man, you'll be there for 4 hours. They'll tell you everything about their job. They want to talk about their work because it's interesting. And
I'm sure not many people want to hear about their work either. Similar to us when we sit around with our friends and families and neighbors. We're like, I'm like a computer security person, and they're like, that's nice, right? They don't know where to go from that.
No, they do know where to go. They go. So what about this Russia thing? That's the next question.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
No,
Did Russia hack the elections?
Right. Yeah, but
Could
I
they
think
have?
Leslie's got a great point. People want to talk about their jobs, and I think that's a really good social engineering thing.
So I go to bars around here, and there's a lot of industry around where I live, and I'll just sit at bars and I'll talk to people. I'm one of those people, like, not if they got earbuds in or they're on their phone or whatever, but I talk to people and I just ask them to tell me about their job and what they do. And it's great practice for me going into those industrial environments, because I found out so much interesting stuff talking to like guys from the power company out here. Like, tell me everything about your job. And sitting there 3 hours later buying them drinks, and I've learned tons about their job. It's pretty exciting, just talk to people and understand where they're coming from, what their motivations are, and just have a conversation with them and understand how to relate to them.
I just have to have a curmudgeon moment for a minute. What I agree with what we're all describing, but a generation ago we just called that social skills. It wasn't social engineering. It was just we knew how to communicate with people, and we practiced communicating with people like in the flesh. So it's a lost art. It should come back.
Mm-hmm.
It should. It's so important. If I could encourage, and I hear it a lot from young people, like, I don't go talk to people. I just know security. And learn how to talk to people, go to Toastmasters, take an improv class, whatever you got to do. You got to learn how to network. You got to learn how to relate to people.
And learn how to write.
Yeah.
Right. Because
present.
Because it's not just about talking to people. It's being able to convey your ideas in written language as well, I think.
Communication skills are extremely important.
Yes.
I think especially in our field.
It's about communication in general, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you've got to be able to be a competent writer, and you've got to be able to be competent in your public speaking as well as your interpersonal relations. It's that simple.
Yeah.
What I always say too, like
OMG, IKR.
Yeah. And what I always say too is, like, everyone says, "Oh, we need to have a good teamwork," I'm like, no, we just need good communication. If we had good communication, the teamwork is just a natural progression from that.
Yeah, teamwork will follow.
Exactly. Yeah. So why are there so many? I mean, this is a broad kind of statement, but I feel like we in security, especially, take the ICS security or insecurity, and we put it in a bucket, and we're like, that's the redheaded stepchild of security, because no one pays attention to security in that entire industry, and we give it a blanket thing. First, is that true? And then secondly, if there is some truth to that, why are there so many issues in ICS today with security?
I think that's not necessarily true. And I think there is a lot more efforts out there in the ICS community to do security than we think. The life cycles and the time involved and the resources are very, very different. Where we're dealing with like the CIA triad in InfoSec, like they're dealing with the AIC triad or something. Like all they care about is availability. They take their systems down for a cybersecurity incident. They're no longer managing like water coming to your house or power going to your house. A lot of these places have like one outage window a year. And that's when they can do all of their maintenance, not just IT maintenance or security maintenance. That's when they can do everything. So that's a big challenge for them.
And those outages aren't very long.
No, and also they've got the technology for a long time. You go to a company like SEL or something and you say, I want to install, say, power plant. They're going to say, okay, we can sell it. This is our package to install a system in a new power plant or an upgraded power plant. And it comes with XYZ systems, all the levels of the Purdue model. And you're buying a package. It's like going to IBM in 1970 or something. You're buying a big suite of stuff that's all going to be interoperable and it's all going to be supported. It's going to speak particular protocols at various levels. And when you want to replace something in that, it's not as simple as I'm going to go to, Fry's or Micro Center or whatever and buy a computer and stick it in there, or a router or whatever. You are going back to that vendor and they're saying, well, it's going to cost you this much to replace this system with the newest version, et cetera. This and this is not in support, et cetera. So you're dealing with these huge integrated systems, and it's very costly to upgrade them to new versions or make drastic changes. You've got to go through your support chain. And that's just the nature of the way those systems operate. It's nothing malicious. So you're dealing with budget constraints, time constraints, and just technical constraints of how the systems are integrated together.
And that's largely because there's hardware that's connected together, unlike enterprise systems, which could be all software, and you can upgrade various components and have new applications. In ICS, a lot of things boil down to, like, it's physically connected to something, and then that device that's physically connected to it may be connected to the network today, or maybe not. Maybe it's still serial, right?
If the PLC that puts the tuna in your cans on your conveyor belt in your tuna plant only can talk to a software that only runs on Windows NT, then guess what? You're not upgrading. Yeah, Windows NT system isn't going away until you replace that entire mechanism with the PLC that puts tuna in the tuna cans. Like,
I like your tuna. How did you come with the tuna? I like the tuna example.
She likes tuna.
I don't know. I think about food when I'm hungry.
Amazing how that works.
But I think, Paul,
of all the foods that you had to choose from, Lesley, you chose tuna. I think that's very interesting.
Yeah, there's no pancakes assembly line, so I there probably is somewhere, but it's probably horrible. They don't deserve the name pancake.
She would have gone with pancakes if she could.
And I would disagree because there are frozen pancakes that have to come off an assembly line somewhere. Yeah, and that face is just...
My kids eat those little tiny mini pancakes that you microwave.
I rest my case.
That are frozen.
The prosecution rests.
Let go of my ego.
I have to make one comment, though, that Lesley, your cocktail glass or whatever you have in that glass is awesome, by the way.
I'm here to a product model for you guys, so there you go.
Fantastic.
It's kind of wearing out, though. I've worn it to pieces. The label's coming off.
I know. Mine is fading away as well.
If you put them in the dishwasher, that happens.
Dishwasher safe.
With the next ones we get, we'll make sure they're dishwasher safe.
And I'm drinking Japanese whiskey.
Oh, what? Nice. Can you be more specific on said Japanese whiskey?
Suntory.
Very nice.
So where are we going from there?
I was going to comment real quickly, Paul.
Yeah.
I don't think it's the dependency on everything's connected to hardware. I think it's more what Lesley was saying about it was originally purchased as a package all together. People just don't know how to rip things apart, and they don't know what's going to happen if they start ripping things apart.
Yeah.
Well, it's a great point, Jeff. Right? I may be able to break things up, but since I've purchased it traditionally as one package, right, that's where I'm going.
It's difficult from a contract perspective and a technical perspective too. It's not necessarily companies being malicious. It's just it takes a delicate balance to get the layer 0 devices talking to the level 2 devices. It's a complex balance of various devices that can speak the proper protocols and handle the proper firmware updates, etc. So.
Larry just took the words out of my mouth in the Slack channel. Sorry, I was distracted for a moment.
It's all my fault.
Well, I have a question, if I may.
Sure.
I mean, I kind of think of everything we're talking about in terms of critical infrastructure, ICS systems. It's almost like the final frontier. These are systems like Leslie's saying that were set up 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago with that old a technology, and they were designed to work, and they largely do work. What other than sort of the headlines and for lack of a better term, the FUD, because it might be very real FUD. What are the things that are driving companies to want to do anything different or do anything from a security perspective to their systems?
I think the FUD definitely plays a part, whether it's valid FUD or horrible FUD. I mean, there's definitely a lot more coverage in the news today about various incidents in the cybersecurity space that people read about, everyday people read about, and that impacts their decisions, their buying decisions, and their decisions to spend money on security. And then there's a lot of legislation and, efforts from the community, efforts from various government entities across the world to try to promote security in those industries. So depending on the vertical, again, there's a lot of momentum to do more security. Things are changing. And I don't want people to get the impression that it's entirely the Wild West out there. A lot of it just has to do with resources.
So what are the various ICS industries doing to deal with some of these security problems? I guess let's start with which industry, in your opinion, Lesley, is making the most progress. We're asking a lot of you tonight. I apologize. These are these are hard questions.
No, it's interesting. Power is doing very, very well because that's a very first of all, it's a very impactful thing. But second of all, that's a very visual thing. Everybody's had the power go out, and they know that it's a natural fear for human beings is the power goes out, and that's a terrifying thing. If it goes out for days, we know what happens. We've seen it in hurricanes. We know how impactful that is to people's lives. So it's something that people can relate to. It's a narrative, and people run on narratives. We understand stories better than we understand evidence and facts necessarily. And power going out is a scary thing. Scarier things to me, of course, are industries that might have less of a budget than our various sections of the grids of the United States, like water treatment. They're much less resourced. A lot of that is municipal, and they don't have a lot of resources, necessarily a lot of staff, and they are not necessarily caring less about security, but it's hard to put a lot of effort and money towards it when you have no people and no money. So, I mean, there's a lot of critical infrastructure that makes our our world go, from transportation, from trucks bringing our food to us every week, to the grocery stores, to, the sewage getting taken away properly from our sewage systems that we don't think about.
It's interesting, Lesley, that those are noticeable things, right? We notice right away when the power goes out, when the water goes out, when the gas goes out. Well, I mean, the water, we would notice if it went out, but we wouldn't notice if someone literally poisoned the watering hole. Right.
Well, I mean, it's taken, we've seen that happen in real life, not necessarily due to cyber incidents, but due to other things. And we know how slow that response can be to a contaminated water supply.
Right.
And actually, it's an interesting thing. A lot of people don't know. One of the first cyber incidents that impacted a system was long before Stuxnet. It was a disgruntled employee dumping sewage out of a system. He was an insider. He knew how to do it, and he got terminated, and he decided to dump a bunch of sewage out of a sewage plant, and it was a horrible mess. So
interesting.
I thought the first attack was somebody running ISS scanner.
Well, you don't want to be, I've actually, without...
That was a joke, people.
Yeah, I did. Jeff, you're not funny. Anyway.
Hey now.
His
children.
looks are most certain. Oh.
Children.
I was gonna say I've done some assessments with shit processing plants, for a lack of a better word, and
there's a technical term.
Something you don't want to have happen is those pumps to get fucked up and you to be drowned in shit. It's that simple.
Yes, it's very bad. That's actually one of my worst case scenarios when I think about what keeps me awake at night is, and I think when you ask a lot of ICS security people, it's not power, it's contaminated water and sewage issues. Those are the ones that make society really unpleasant very rapidly. So transportation too, just we live in a house of cards. We do just in time everything. And transportation goes, bad things happen to our society. So
society goes really shitty really fast.
Yeah, so you actually hit on a good point there, Lesley. The fact that we live in just in time
that was a crappy
society
joke,
now, and the fact that the supply chain of just about everything that we're dealing with is completely vertically integrated, and it's a house of cards that could really come down really, really fast. That to me is probably the most frightening thing of all.
But no, Lesley, earlier you talked about physical safeguards, though. I mean, how much of a reality is this? You also mentioned a lot of research to potentially bypass those physical safeguards, no?
So the more people are concerned about physical human safety, operator safety in an environment, or community safety, preventing contamination, the more physical safeguards they'll usually put in. It has to do with legislation and regulation too. But a lot of those safeguards are there to protect life and safety. And yeah, there are physical safeguards. That's why, people always like an adversary is going to bring down the United States grid. They're not going to bring down the United States grid. The United States grid is already broken into regions that are disparate regions. And then beyond that, we're talking about multiple independent operators that are operating with different technologies from different eras in different configurations with various different physical safeguards. If you're a bad guy, you've got to go into each of those systems, do reconnaissance, which we do see happening as people specializing in this. But you've got to do the reconnaissance, and you've got to spend a lot of tech debt and thinking power from a ICS perspective, figuring out how they operate it, how to break them. And then if you actually want to launch an attack that brings down a large portion of the United States, you've got to have done that and then have a dedicated resource for each one of those independent components of the network to bring it down in a disparate effort. So it's a huge effort to bring down these systems. To do it accidentally, that's definitely possible. You could hit the wrong button and bring something down, but to do it purposefully without somebody noticing, that's really, really difficult. Because of the disparity in the systems. And I was giving a talk last week and I said a lot of it's security by obscurity, and it's unfortunate but true. But these systems are very complex, and you need to have an operator level knowledge to know how to not just accidentally break them, how to purposefully and accurately break them. Yeah,
it's interesting. We did a webcast this week on insider threat, and I would imagine that gets a lot of it, or should get a lot of attention in ICS. A lot of the things you're not hearing about in the news are just insiders poking at things in these environments. Be very careful when you fire the guy who's administering your power plant IT networks, because he does know how to break things substantially. I think we've covered why there's so many legacy systems in ICS, right?
Yeah.
Essentially, the infrastructure was built before there were computers, right?
Well, it was built to last.
Yeah.
It is
I mean,
built
we've
to last. It's very expensive and it's all integrated with itself. And even if you buy a system today, it's going to be the same way. It's going to be integrated. It's going to be supported under one contract, et cetera, et cetera. And that system's going to be expected to last for 15 to 30 years.
And you mentioned legislation briefly, Lesley, as having a positive impact, which when we talk about IoT, which is kind of like, I don't want to say the other side of the house, right? But there are essentially embedded systems that are built for a different purpose than controlling our critical infrastructure. Legislation has largely been a flop, and I think will continue to be from everything that I've seen. How has legislation played into ICS? Sounds like there are some wins there.
Man, IoT legislation is like ICS, like 10, 15 years ago. We're seeing all the same things over again. Like it's just kind of almost shocking, like to see all the same mistakes being made again. But I mean, there's good ways and bad ways to do legislation. You can definitely legislate in ICS. Like if you tell people you have to do XYZ compliance thing or audit thing, if they are that water treatment plant somewhere that's got one IT employee, you're taking that IT employee off of all of their patching duties and all of their system maintenance duties and everything that they do to do the basic security that they can do just to do a compliance audit. But on the other hand, if you're legislating that people have to have access to threat intelligence, they have to have proper resources and funding to do security, or be provided with, consulting, stuff like that, that's wonderful. So it's a balancing act between doing legislation that kills people's ability to actually do security, and then legislation that gives them resources to do it properly.
What are some of the more specifically ICS threats, Lesley, that keep you up at night?
I kind of mentioned that already, but like water is a big one because it's so insidious. Like, contaminating the water supply over time is horrific. That has horrific implications. Your sewage system no longer working. Boy, if anybody's lived in a place where that's stopped working, that is a thing that you notice very rapidly, and it makes your quality of life go down very, very fast. And transportation too. Again, we're talking about those just-in-time delivery systems where you stop getting food very, very rapidly if your transportation system isn't working right, or gas or whatever. I mean, the point of most industrial attacks, other than like angry insiders, when you talk about like targeted attacks against ICS, is to spread lack of confidence in the system, despair, fear, things like that. It's not necessarily to kill people by bringing down power. It's to make them feel loss of confidence in their government. It's to make them afraid. It's to make them feel like they're isolated. That's why you normally conduct an attack like that. And it's usually in conjunction with something else. So anything that an adversary can do to cause that feeling of despair, like your toilet no longer flushing and sewage coming up with it, is a scary thing, a miserable thing for human life and safety, as well as confidence in their government and the people around them.
And one could say we have to protect our critical infrastructure. And I found it very interesting that this week in the news, Israel was reported to send an airstrike that blew up the cyber intelligence division in Pakistan, right? Did I get that right?
Yeah,
my politics right? Palestine. Hamas.
Yeah.
Hamas. It was a Hamas.
Yeah.
Palestine, Pakistan.
You're going to be really careful about how I phrase that.
Yes.
Yeah, I saw that. That was definitely an escalation in how we respond to cyber conflicts.
Mm-hmm. I won't be hacking Israel ever.
No.
Again.
No,
I mean, ever. No,
not,
I'm not again.
Let's not do that thing.
Unless you have permission.
Unless
and then
you
it's
have
not
permission.
called hacking, it's called penetration testing.
This is true.
Always about permission. That's right.
Lesley, I have a note here that you should tell us about your crazy smart apartment antics.
Oh my God.
I don't know what that means.
It's too long of a story for this call.
No, it's not.
It is a long story.
It's a long story, and I talked about it at B-Sides KC last week, so go see my talk that's recorded there. But some people tried to install a smart apartment system in my apartment, and things ended poorly for everybody.
Wait, install a what?
A smart apartment system.
What is a smart apartment system?
So it's a thing that's going to be in like every apartment in the next 2 years, which is your lock will now be a smart lock. Your hub will be controlling your thermostat, your, water sensors, various light sensors, outlets, etc. And your landlord will be able to monitor everything you do with those systems in your apartment and do metrics, do heuristics, try to figure out what's going on, make sure you're not subletting, make sure you're not using your apartment as Airbnb, make sure you're not having too many guests over. So it's really good for them, and it's convenient for renters definitely too, to be able to control their thermostat from their phone and stuff, but it's all being controlled by your landlord and whatever company that they contract out to do these systems. And I saw the system that was being installed in my unit and went super nope and tore it apart and got Dallas hackers involved, and we tore the system to pieces. We bought everything in it and tore it to pieces. And it was a huge adventure. The company actually responded really, really well, along with a lot of the other companies in the space. And I was super impressed. I've never had that much good response to a vuln disclosure before. So that was good. And I guess the end of that story is I got asked to go on NPR, and I was on NPR talking about it. And then I got asked to go to a smart apartment conference, or a smart apartment technology conference, and talk to all of those companies too. So
that's awesome.
It's wild.
Excited and happy that you were a part of that, and that they were so receptive of a hacker coming to their conference.
It was utterly wild. Yeah,
that's awesome.
And I don't know if anybody heard. I don't know if anybody heard Lesley on NPR, but she did a fabulous job. I mean, you really, really did great. It was such a great interview.
It was so cool. Like, I guess I can just quit InfoSec now because I got to be on my favorite show on NPR. But,
it was. I couldn't believe it. I mean, Lesley knows that I took to Twitter. I was like, dude, I heard you on the NPR. It was really great.
It's cool, and I love helping out with stories like that. And every apartment is going to have this kind of system in the next, like every publicly or like a property management company managed apartment is going to have one of these systems in the next few years. And it's just really, it's the way things are going, and it's going to happen. It's just doing it right from a privacy and security perspective is really, really important to me, so that everybody's safe, everybody's data is protected. And a lot of thought into that wasn't done before I got there. So I hope that they're doing better now, and it sounds like they really are motivated to do a better job. So it was a best case scenario for everybody.
Yep. And I think that industry tries to put controls around things because they're renting it to people, right? And a lot of times those controls are easily bypassed, like the little plastic thing with the lock over the thermostat in the rented area that I picked on Easter.
Hey, for those of us that were probably on an airplane when the segment aired, what show were you on and when on NPR?
I was on Marketplace, and they aired it a couple times, actually. I was on Marketplace Tech, and if you look for Marketplace Tech and you search for like smart apartments, you should see the audio clip there. It's pretty short. It's a short segment. And really the question that they leave people with is, should residents be able to say no to this technology? And we just saw a case in New York last week where there was a successful arbitration agreement that said residents could say no to this technology, and they could ask for, mechanical locks in their apartments if they wanted them. And it's a complex issue, and it's going to take a lot of soul searching and a lot of privacy discussions beyond me to figure it out.
Yep. Lesley, I put that story in our stories of the week and was going to bring that up now, but you beat me to it. So.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's great. Sorry. It's perfect.
No, that's cool.
That's perfect.
Yeah.
Well,
perfect.
I mean, it was a great story to raise the awareness. That's the thing. And the fact that there's been cases already, I think, is really fascinating because, I mean, it scares the crap out of me. I've got mechanical locks on my house. I'm not going there yet. I'm going to be a Luddite. That's just the way I feel about it. So I really appreciate you raising that awareness on the story. You did a great job on that.
And I'm wearing a Fitbit right now. I'm not anti-smart devices at all. I mean, like, they have their place, but having some say in that, like, when you're renting, you don't have a choice in what your landlord does to you. And we previously had no protections as a tenant against them monitoring every action you do inside your apartment beyond, like, installing cameras.
It's a matter of bringing awareness to the choice, right? I mean, that's what
there was no choice there. And I want there to be choice, and I want there to be cognizant efforts to improve security and privacy for those residents. Because, again, this is how it's going to be. It's like having electronic locks in hotels. This is, in a few years, how it will be.
I think probably the biggest issue that we face as a society in the near future, if not the present, is simply the concept of opt-in or opt-out.
We've given up so much. We're monitored from the beginning of the day to the end of the day, from how our heart rate to where we go on our phones, every step we take, what we eat. Sometimes we give all that information away. Our whole lives now are monitored and tracked. And,
but it's interesting. It's amazing what as society, right, will give up for some type of benefit. We'll opt in to something like a smart apartment if that means maybe if you opt in, your rent is 10% cheaper than the people that don't opt in, right? Now people are like, yeah, I can throw that privacy thing out the window to save 10% a month, right?
And they will. And we've definitely seen that again and again. And that's why I felt like it was my responsibility to put a little fight up for this. It wasn't, I'm going to move. I'm buying a house right now and I'm going to be out of here. And I can't I don't want to deal with this migration.
Yeah, but then you'll get a home security system and it's going to start all over again.
Well, no, I have smart locks, and I also have cameras and maybe firearms as well.
Yes.
I don't have a problem
swords.
with any of those things. It's just when you have them forced on you, and again, we've got the third party here that's doing the monitor. Are they reselling your data? Are they keeping a record of how do they secure the data about what guests you have? It's there's a lot of questions to ask, and I hope that they are taking this seriously.
Hey, Paul, you should ask Lesley what she was doing in Austin last week.
Oh yeah, you guys had the thing in Austin that I'll let Jeff and Lesley talk about.
Yeah,
we got to hang out with Jeff.
Yeah, we were just hanging out.
You're just hanging out. Oh, and there happened to be a Tribe of Hackers thing while you guys were hanging out.
But I was mostly there to hang out with Jeff. It's fine.
I get that.
Yeah, because it's been a long time since we
did you guys go to a cigar lounge together? Because no. Jeff, did you make it to a cigar lounge?
Several, thank you.
Oh, okay.
Nice.
Good.
Yeah, he made a vacation.
There was a Casa de Monte Cristo in Austin. I started there, and somebody told me about a place. I'm gonna blank on the name. It starts with a B. They roll their own. They make their own cigars, and it used to be downtown Austin, but it moved out to the suburbs.
There's a lot of
somebody's screaming at me now what it is.
So Lesley, you'll have to come to a cigar lounge with us. It'll be a great time, I promise.
I really need to do that next time I'm out your way. Totally.
Absolutely. Lesley, your day job, you work for Dragos. Somewhat recently, they've got funding, and on the industry side, tracking Dragos is doing very well, and I'm very happy for you and Rob Lee and the entire team there. On Twitter, she is at Hacks4Pancakes, the number 4 pancakes. You should follow her. I do. So we all do, I think. So
so sorry.
Lesley, thank you so much for appearing again on Paul Security Weekly. It's wonderful having you.
Thank you. It's been wonderful. It's good to see you guys again.
Good to see you. And with that, we'll take a short break, come back with Chris Sanders to talk about applied network defense and the Rural Technology Fund. Stay tuned.